Merci, Monsieur le Président, Excellences, chers collègues, chers amis. I stand before you today under duress, tasked with presenting our assessment on the Syrian Arab Republic. At the same time, I cannot ignore that one of our colleagues, Francesca Albanese, a special rapporteur on the Palestinian-occupied territories, is facing serious reprisals for fulfilling the very same duty entrusted on us by the Human Rights Council here. And what is this task? Inform the world on the situation of human rights. Our collective endeavor exists precisely to promote more debate on human rights, not less debate on human rights. Monsieur le Président, Excellences, following decades of brutal dictatorship, 9 months ago, a wave of renewed aspirations for peace and justice swept Syria. During our visit last week, we observed that these hopes continue to be very much present for many, though outbursts of violence against civilians in parts of the country are sources of grave concern. In Damascus, with entering government officials, we discussed the potential of the ongoing political and institutional transformation to enhance the respect and protection of the human rights for all Syrians. We also took to them our concerns regarding renewed violence and challenges to the enjoyment of human rights that require concrete steps to address, as set out in the recommendations of our latest report. The Minister of Justice assured us that every effort was being made to guarantee that arrests taking place in Syria are happening with judicial oversight and that detainees have access to their families and lawyers. Of course, an assurance we are pleased to receive and on which we will follow up very closely. In this regard, we reiterate our long-standing recommendation for a moratorium on the implementation of the death penalty, with a view towards full abolition. We also met with the new National Authority on Missing Persons and members of the Transitional Justice Authority. We stressed the importance of ensuring that the families who have tirelessly searched for their loving ones are central to this process as active participants. Syria's future depends on integrating all its regions and communities in a unified, secure, rights-respecting state. This requires a political and security environment sufficiently stable for the root causes of grievance and violations to be addressed, to build robust, accountable, and transparent governance and guaranteed of non-repetition. The human rights situation in Syria, while vastly different from the systematic violations of the Assad era, is nonetheless dire. Last month, we released a report documenting attacks on the Alawite community since January 2025, peaking with the widespread and systematic killing of more than 1,400 men, women, and children in just a few days in March, across Latakia, Tartus, and Hama governorates, including by members of the interim government security forces. Such acts, which may amount to war crimes, call for decisive protection, accountability, and compensation for victims and affected communities by the state authorities. We noted that the interim authorities encouraging settlements last week regarding holding those responsible for the crimes committed in March accountable and look forward to additional transparent and visible action in that regard. All individuals held in state custody for suspected violations of international human rights or domestic law must be held in a dignified manner and brought promptly before impartial tribunals with guarantees of fair trial. Our report proposed several recommendations which the Foreign Minister encouragingly indicated will serve as a roadmap for the government. Concerted efforts are needed to restore protection, ensure well-trained law enforcement and non-repetition. This is urgent. We continue to receive reports of ongoing killings, arbitrary arrests, and detention of members of the Alawite community, as well as the confiscation and occupation of the property of those fled the March violence. Other areas are also impacted. In August, an armed group evicted many Alawite residents in Damascus suburb of Sumaria, claiming they held eviction orders on behalf of the state, with reports of abductions, beatings, and ill treatment of civilians amidst sectarian insults. We call on the interim authorities to urgently address the underlying causes of violence, prevent the recurrence of violations, and work to restore trust between the state and impacted communities. We have seen how hate speech and incitement to violence contributed to the commission of severe violations. Such inflammatory statements are continuing to fuel fear, division, and violence, and have the potential to lead to further escalation, including in areas and communities that were spared during the recent spikes in violence. Monsieur le Président, Excellences, mid-July saw another round of violence in Soweto Governorate, stemming from a local conflict between Druze and Bedouin communities that drew in other actors and displaced nearly 200,000 civilians. Hundreds of people, predominantly Druze, but also Bedouins and others, were killed and injured, according to our initial information. Following the intervention of interim government forces who stated they were there to restore order, videos show Druze men being summarily executed and subjected to humiliating and degrading treatment, revealing a climate of extreme violence, marked also by looting and destruction of property. Bedouin communities also reported being subjected to serious violations at the hands of certain armed groups. The conduct of interim government security forces during these operations raised serious concern, and the interim president stated last week that mistakes were made by all parties. On 31st July, the Minister of Justice appointed a committee tasked with investigating the reported serious violations, including allegedly by forces who participate in atrocities committed in the coastal areas in March. It announced earlier this month that members of interim government security forces have been arrested for committing violations, some on the basis of video evidence. When we met the committee last week, they underscored their independence and intention to impartially investigate violations against all communities. Our own investigations into these events was initiated in July. We had sought access to Soweto by the time of our visit last week, during which we met both Druze and Bedouins who had fled Soweto with Damascus. We welcome the announcement last Tuesday by the Foreign Ministry in the roadmap on Soweto that the Commission, in the very first item, is invited to investigate these events. Accordingly, we are proposing new dates to initiate work in all affected areas shortly. These clashes also triggered the involvement of other actors, including tribal forces from other parts of the country, illustrating the overall fragility of the current security environment across Syria. Israel further deepened its military involvement and continued its frequent airstrikes on Syria, including in Damascus near key government buildings, causing significant destruction and reportedly resulting in civilian casualties, and recently in the vicinity of Homs, Latakia, and Palmyra cities. In the south, Israel continued to violate Syria's sovereignty, further occupying lands beyond the 1974 separation line, forcibly displacing civilians residing there and reportedly arbitrarily detaining Syrian nationals. These actions further destabilize highly secure regions and must end immediately. In northeast Syria, tensions are also high as efforts to implement the 10 March agreement between the interim authorities and the SDF appear to have stalled. Recent clashes accompanied by violent rhetoric have triggered concerns that a further eruption of violence may undermine the status quo in this part of the country, where thousands of alleged ISIL members remain detained and the threat of ISIL persists. In this context, it is essential to intensify efforts towards de-escalation and dialogue. All in all, more than 220,000 people are estimated to have been newly internally displaced from areas seeing hostilities and violence, in addition to many missing or abducted. Among the latter, women have been particularly exposed. We received reports of gender-based violence and the abduction of Druze women following the clashes in Soweto. We also received the reports of primarily Alawite women abducted in broad daylight in city centers by unknown armed actors. Initial information indicates that some were sexually assaulted before their release, while others were subjected to forced marriage. It is highly disturbing that in many cases where women went missing, families report that local police authorities have not yet investigated such acts. We call on the interim authorities to immediately take action on this case. More encouragingly, nearly 1 million Syrian refugees and 2 million IDPs have returned to their homes since 8 December. We welcome the easing of sanctions by US, EU, and UK, which opens up potential for vital reconstruction that could reduce humanitarian needs. For the moment, however, these needs are more acute than ever for 60 million people, and yet aid agencies have so far received only just 18%. I repeat, just 18%. This is a shame of the humanitarian appeal for 2025. Monsieur le Président, Excellences, je vais conclure. The Syrian people continue to call for justice that restores their dignity after dictatorship and war, for a future built on rights, accountability, and inclusion, rather than fear, oppression, and violence. We call on all states in this honorable assembly to support their legitimate aspirations and to assist the interim Syrian authorities in building towards the future. Merci.
Merci.